Good Friday afternoon, everybody. It is a good Friday afternoon because we are live from Follett's Purdue Pride. We're just within if the sun was out, we'd be within the shadows of Ross-Ade Stadium, but it's raining here. And yet it's good to be with you again, and we're excited about being. The WLFI studios are under renovation, so we are taking our show on the road. Last week, not as good. This week is going to be awesome. And we'll have with me today Stacy Clarity and Brian Newbert. Stacy in the middle, Brian's on the right. I think we have graphics, but I'm kind of winging it in terms of looking at all that. But we are, this is the show you're watching, if you don't know, is Gold and Black Live, and we're going to talk about something other than the quarterback situation, but we will talk about that as well.
Yeah.
And we have sponsors too.
Really?
Okay, well,
No,
I'll talk amongst myself then. We do have sponsors for this show, and first and foremost, our good friend Jeff Julick in the house, Follett's Purdue's Game Day Outfitters since 1945, and he'll be on the show segment 2 because Jeff's day job is with Follett's and Purdue Pride and trying to keep all that in line. He's been here, I think, since about 1988, but his real passion is Purdue sports and football and college sports, so he'll have a lot to say in segment 2 with Bart Burrell joining him. We're going to try to figure out a way that Purdue can win tomorrow at Notre Dame, and or at least to talk about what it will take to do that. And again, our sponsors, Hilton Garden Inn, when tomorrow's a big day, State HGI tonight, and of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson's. And Trent is my agent.com, 497-9595 is his number. And Trent will be on the sidelines tonight at a high school football game du jour. Hopefully dodging raindrops and hopefully not lightning. But Stacy, lightning for Purdue tomorrow would be what for the Boilermakers if they can, in terms of what is it going to take for Purdue to stay in that football game tomorrow, in your opinion?
I think they need to block.
Okay.
The offensive line to me is the biggest key. Is can they slow down Notre Dame's front seven? We didn't really see what they could do last week, so you're kind of going on, okay, and they look like they protected pretty well, but obviously the caliber of opponent that they played is not going to be the same for what they'll see tomorrow. So for me, that's kind of the key. Is we'll talk about the quarterbacks, obviously, but to me, I'm not sure it really matters who's playing quarterback if you can't give that person any kind of protection.
And Brian, obviously, you scoured Notre Dame, looked at them very closely after the, I think scouring is the right term. You've looked at them, you've researched, you've investigated. After the Irish's 50-10 win last Saturday in Dublin, it wasn't Dublin, Ohio, it was Dublin, Ireland. And, of course, an impressive win for Notre Dame. Notre Dame, every year, it seems like in the last 10, is trying to get itself to where they can be historically, they've been a top 10 program, but be back in that conversation. I guess they took a step last week, but this is a must-win for them. It's a game that they're supposed to win against Purdue, but they have a murderer's row schedule coming up. But what do you see as the early keys for Purdue tomorrow?
Well, I think I would certainly concur with Stacy about them having to block, but we can go into so many different aspects of this game that will be absolutely crucial for Purdue to compete, let alone win. Purdue made some mistakes last week against an FCS opponent that in a 48-6 win, if they repeat some of those mistakes, that might flip that score altogether against a good opponent. You can't turn the ball over 5 times. You can't have 2 kicks blocked. You can't fumble a punt against an opponent like this, or else you're going to get run out of the stadium. But as Stacy said earlier, we've spent this whole week talking about the quarterbacks because it might be the most interesting story, but it's not the most interesting part of this, or the most important part of this game. Purdue has to compete at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. It has to be able to tackle in the second and third levels of its defense against a pretty physical running game. It has to be able to obviously protect the football, which is why Caleb Turbush is apparently starting over Robert Marv. And it just has to play good fundamental football. I mean, that's just what this comes down to. Purdue has to show it can compete with an opponent like this this year. Last year, every team Purdue played that went on to win 8 or more games, and I'm using that measure basically to say Notre Dame, Michigan, Wisconsin, Purdue got blown out. If Purdue is going to show it's taking the next step this season, it can win the same amount of games it did last year. It can win 7 games, would still be a good season as long as it shows that it belongs with some of these, on the same field as some of these better teams.
Well, Lydia back at the station is already sending us questions, and that's how this show works. You get the opportunity to talk amongst yourselves in the chat room. You can send us direct questions on the screen that you're looking at, and I have to look to my left today since we're without a table today. But looking at Trent asked, do you think that we meaning Purdue, will take some chances downfield tomorrow against Notre Dame? Last week, you didn't see much of that. Thoughts, Stacy? Fire away.
You would hope so. Obviously, one of Notre Dame's weaknesses that we know of, at least or suspect is a weakness, is they only have their cornerbacks are first-year starters. Mm-hmm. So maybe the safeties have a little bit more experience, but not too much, I don't think, right?
No.
From the investigating that you
They
did.
lost their best corner before the season to an injury, Low Wood.
Right.
They have a freshman back there, and they have a junior who I'm not sure has played all that much.
Right. So you would
first-year starters.
Right. So you would think that absolutely would be something you would try to take advantage of. Spoke with Raheem Mostert this week, and I know Kyle talked to O.J. Ross, obviously two receivers there who've been in kind of the game planning and the meeting room, and they didn't want to say much, but when you brought that up, that hey, they have some inexperience back there. They seem like they were getting a little bit excited. We definitely want to try to do something, but obviously they're not going to tell you what exactly they're going to do. So we'll see. But you would suspect it would be something that would be longer than a screen pass.
Right.
Well, I was going to say first on the Irish, one of the corners, obviously starting a true freshman, Kavari Russell, but it's hard to tell against Navy.
Right.
Everybody got excited because Navy threw up top on them, and the Notre Dame folks are freaking out because of that. But that was kind of a function of how that football game went last week.
Well, it was also just sort of part of their game plan. When you play Navy, what the corners have in their head is stop the run, stop the run, stop the run. So there's, of course, going to be opportunities to take advantage of that mentality they're playing with. This week, that's going to be completely different. They are going to be geared up to stop the pass. Now, when we talk about whether or not Purdue can take advantage of those corners, how do you take advantage of inexperience at corner? You test them up the field, you test them deep. Can Purdue do that? We don't know because they couldn't do it last year. Either they couldn't do it last year or that wasn't their main priority. This was an offense that did not make a lot of big plays in the passing game. They didn't try a lot of big plays in the passing game. The big plays they did make were all on screens and short little passes trying to hit seams and whatnot. So the way Purdue's offense is kind of operated, going back to last season, I'm not sure it's necessarily engineered to take advantage of, whatever vulnerability Notre Dame might have at those corner spots.
Well, I know that comes down to protection again.
Yeah, no doubt.
You can't protect it.
Right. You need to be able to take a 5-7 step drop and have some time to throw 30 yards downfield.
Well, Purdue has been, at least according to certainly on Knucklehead this morning, a lot of talk among Purdue fans about Purdue being the flavor of the minute, at least in terms of the upset. Maybe only because I think it was Mark May that picked the Boilermakers, though he made an interesting comment that Purdue needs to continue. I think he said to go up top, but I don't know where the word continue gets into that. But Purdue needs to be able to. One would think that that will be something that is going to show up eventually in this offense, but. Again, I would agree that protection is a key thing. All right, another question from Brian's dad's son.
Do we get to talk about the quarterbacks?
Yes, okay. Just hang loose. It's on. We're trying to.
I was going to make a point about Mark May. Well, does Mark May really know enough about Purdue at this stage of the season to pick Purdue, or is he just trying to get Lou Holtz all worked up for the sake of good TV?
I think the latter may be correct. Though Mark has actually been he's been a subscriber to our magazine for some reason, and that's all. We always appreciate that.
Really?
Yeah. Here's a question from Brian's dad's son. I don't know if it's Brian Newbert's dad, but who's your pick for the breakout performer for this weekend? I am feeling this. Brian's dad's son said this. I am feeling O.J. Ross. I think he'll finally hook up with Turbush on a deep ball. Thoughts? Yeah. Oh, we got two people together. Okay, we're combining. That's okay. I'll start with that. I think tomorrow the guy. I don't know if he's going to be the pick to click, but the guy that I'm outside of quarterback that I'm going to be watching. I want to see if Purdue can move the ball vertically, and that's going to come through the tight end. Gabe Holmes will be the guy.
That was all of ours. You just stole it all. Can we all pick the same?
Yes. No, you need to come up with somebody else. Gabe Holmes is who I'm watching tomorrow. I like the way, he, obviously last week in his 3 catches, I think in the second quarter, that he kind of took the ball vertical. There's been a lot of talk about that this week in terms of the ability to do that. Now that I stole your thunder, who do you have as your backup?
Throw it to Gabe Holmes. I mean, he's the one guy. Purdue doesn't have a big, tall wide receiver to throw the ball to.
With experience.
Gabe Holmes is probably about as fast as probably most tight ends out there you can find in the country. I'm not going to make the Dustin Keller comparison yet because they're two very different players from a physical standpoint. Not to mention, Gabe Holmes has to do something before we can even start, making that comparison. But he is 6'6". He does run like a wide receiver, and he is going to be matched up against linebackers and safeties. So give it a try.
Okay. All right. Since you guys are antsy to talk about that, we'll all weigh in on the quarterback. Perceived controversy from last week in terms of any time that you have three quarterbacks anyway that are going to play, there's going to be discussion. Obviously, the job that Marv did statistically last week certainly raised some eyebrows. A terrific week, hitting 30 out of 38 passes for 295 or whatever Robert did. All right, we have some differing opinion about who should be starting this week, but again, it's an opinion. That's why we're here. So, Stacy, we'll let you. This is kind of like the Republican National Convention and the DNC, and I'll play moderator in between. Go ahead, Stacy.
I'm saying Caleb Turbush, and the reason that I'm saying that is because from people who have seen practice, and who, not coaches. That's fair to say. We can say
Correct.
That they're not coaches.
Yes. Sources close to the program.
Sources close to the program.
How about that?
Have told us, because obviously Danny Hope has said Caleb Turbush has looked better than anybody in practice, but other people have told us that that is the case. So for my point of view, I said, well, let's see it. I want to see it and see if that's the case. So get Turbush out there, see what he can do. Granted, it's against a different level of competition, but we've heard that he's a better player, and I would like to see what that means. And I'm just saying that for this week because I personally prefer a guy who can maybe will make some mistakes, but can give you some excitement and throw the ball down the field and get out of the pocket. So I think I like Marv's skill set better, but I would like to see Turbush. And even though I think we're all, us here and fans in general, are upset that he got suspended. You can't do that as a senior, and you can't do that as a captain. And for me, Danny Hope absolutely should have said, I am disappointed in what he did. And that those words never came out of his mouth. So. But anyway, I'm saying Turbush for the week for kind of those reasons.
I have a hard time making a good argument here because we have heard and we do believe that Caleb Turbush has been the better quarterback in practice. He has done some better things than Robert Marv. He does take better care of the football. But I have said since the summer that I think for this team this year, with the offensive players they have around the quarterback position, I think you need more than a manager. And when I say manager, I don't mean that in the negative sense of the term, where the guy who just hands off and doesn't lose the game. I think you need a guy who can make this offense a little bit better than the sum of its parts. I don't think they have extraordinary skill talent on this team. They might. I don't know. We don't know that yet. But I think Robert Marv's talent is such that it can make this offense a little bit better than the sum of its parts. He's got the arm to pull off that quick passing game. He's got the arm to throw it down the field. He's got the legs to make plays running the football. He's obviously going to throw some interceptions, but if you want to score points, sometimes you have to make some mistakes. Obviously, I'm not a coach. My job's not on the line when I make these decisions, so it's easy for me to say that. I just think Robert Marv's talent is such that I think he deserves a shot. And he wasn't suspended last week. That's a big part of this, too, for me.
Okay. And I think, and I agree with the suspension part. I think that troubles me. I just don't like the idea, and I'm sure Caleb Turbush doesn't like the idea of a senior being suspended. But I do think that Danny Hope has looked at this and said, we're going to play three quarterbacks anyway. What's the big deal? Now I know he did kind of make the revelation that more stridently this week about Turbush being heads above everybody else. But I think he could have just probably stemmed some of that tide by saying on Monday, hey, I thought Marv played a great game, but Caleb has served his time, his suspension. We're not happy about it. But by the same token, he's our guy, and probably would have at least quelled some of this debate. But quarterback controversy. When you say you're going to play three, I don't know how you're. And when you're going into a game as big as this game is, you have to expect some discussion. And to be honest, my overriding feeling is that based on interest in this program right now, it's not a bad thing to have some things to talk about. And I think the team is pretty insulated. How they feel about who's starting, I'm sure you'll hear after the football game tomorrow as well. But I think that this team, it's not bad to have a topic of conversation on the front burner heading into a game like this. I just don't. I know. There's when you play Notre Dame, you're always going to have some of that, but still, I think it isn't all bad when you're talking Purdue football, and you should be heading into the second.
Can I make one small point real quick about the
Go ahead.
quarterbacks? I'm sorry. Ordinarily, when I want to say something, I have a table to knock on. I have nothing to knock on except for my knee, maybe.
You can send me signals. Go ahead.
When we talk about all three quarterbacks playing, I do want to draw a little bit of a distinction between three guys taking snaps and Purdue running a quote-unquote three-quarterback system, which obviously would be preposterous to try to run a three-quarterback system. I think the Rob Henry factor is kind of more of a wrinkle in the sense that he's just going to go out there for certain plays. He's not necessarily part of the system, so to speak. It's kind of like Purdue used Justin Siller last year to run the Wildcat, but you wouldn't have said Purdue ran a three-quarterback system last year. Obviously, you don't want to throw too many quarterbacks out there as part of the game plan. You don't want three guys sharing the snaps when the guys who are going to play the most obviously need that work. So I just wanted to draw that distinction so people don't think Purdue's really quote-unquote playing three quarterbacks. They're just putting three quarterbacks out there in certain situations.
Is that a signal that you'd like to say something?
Okay, and also, though, and we could talk about this for an hour. If Caleb Turbish was hands down the best quarterback, why are they playing more than one quarterback?
But because that's what he does.
I think from a philosophical standpoint, he honestly wants to do that.
Yeah,
I don't think
there's any doubt.
He thinks he's got two guys who can play. I think he honestly likes the idea of playing two quarterbacks.
Because your second guy already has experience.
Yes.
So you're not building experience with Robert Mark.
He
is an experienced quarterback now. So why does he need to play if Caleb Turbish is hands down the best quarterback?
I think that's in Danny's MO.
Now, so much has happened at the quarterback position at Purdue the last couple of years. That's a little bit more reasonable at Purdue than it might be at other schools. And I'm having a really hard time finding the camera. There it is.
Right there.
Okay. I think it's a little more reasonable at Purdue to say we're going to play two quarterbacks to get guys experience because so much has happened. But at the same time, at what point does that moment arrive where you just kind of have to pick one?
Right.
And if one guy is hands down better in practice.
Well, let's start another Firestone conjecture. In 2015, will it be Danny Etling and Austin Appleby going back and forth? I don't know on that, and your guess is as good as ours. Now, we have some great questions and some comments. We got one from a ND fan. Does Brian have a leprechaun in his cargo pants? No, he does not.
I don't. That's horrible. Just potentially disgusting. I'm not really sure what that meant, but I don't even want to know. That's we got to screen these questions.
Oh no, you can't. We have a lot of them in here today. When do you think? What Raheem Mostert to me is the guy that is one of the most interesting man in the world, I suppose, the most interesting man in Purdue's football world in terms of
Sharks have a week dedicated to him.
Yeah. I like what he brings to the table. We haven't seen him, I think, as we point out in the office, and it seems like a regular basis, we haven't seen him catch the ball yet, except for on kick returns. He receives it. But he's a guy that is explosive. We've remembered guys like Jerome Brooks having a long kickoff return back in the 2004 win, and then of course next year he was gone for the program, I believe. But the interesting thing is you need some explosiveness. Where do you see a guy like Mostert? And it's been two questions on him. Where do you see him fitting in? And do you think is he really going to be a receiver? Is he really going to be a running back in this offense?
Yeah, I talked to him this week. We had a story on our site on Wednesday. Check that out if you haven't. And basically talk to him about that. Your snaps and are mostly coming, or at least your production is mostly coming at running back on offense.
Yeah.
And he's kind of torn. He's like, I really want to get that first catch. I don't even think they've actually thrown it.
No, I don't know.
Toward him at any point in his career, his short career, but he wants to be able to get the ball out of the backfield and run it because he has kind of some physical skill and he can do that and he can make plays that way. But he also really wants to get that catch. So he's kind of torn between, like, do I want to be a receiver? Do I want to play running back? So, but I think, and I asked Danny Hope about that this week, okay, so what do you do? Is he a running back? Is he getting most of his, touches that way? And of course he just says, we're going to try to get the ball in his hands any way that we can. For right now, I think that's running back because if he was high on the receiver kind of depth chart, we would have seen him in the offense in the first half. At receiver, we did not.
I don't think there's a whole lot of distinction to be drawn between that slot receiver position and him actually playing running back because of what Purdue does with that position. They almost alternate equal time between the backfield and the slot. I think the interesting thing about him is that when you have that kind of speed, and we've all seen the speed because we've seen him return kicks, I think you want to get him the ball in space. And when you look at what he's doing out of the backfield, everything he's doing is between the tackles. At some point in time this season, you kind of wonder if maybe he doesn't factor more into that screen game that's such a big part of their offense, or if they, maybe they try to throw him some swing passes out of the backfield, try to get him out in space a little bit so that he's not always running in traffic, and maybe he has more of an opportunity to show that speed.
All right, we have time for a couple more questions, and we're getting slammed with them today, which is a good thing. People knock Turbush for passing conservatively, but isn't that the essence of Gary Nord's offense? You can't throw deep routes that aren't run. Agree or disagree?
You can only run the play that's called, I guess, yeah. But at the same time, if a play is called, coaches want their players to execute those plays. I think part of the concern with Marv, and I finally found the camera, is that I think maybe they felt in the past he's a little bit quick to deviate from the play that's called. I think that drives coaches crazy sometimes. And when the result of that freelancing is good, they love it. When it's not good, obviously, they hate it. So I think Turbush is the one who probably carries out his assignments maybe a little more consistently than Marv does. And that's a big consideration for coaches.
Yeah. Anything to add to that?
That was good.
Okay. One last question on kicking game and what sort of adjustments have been made in the kicking game due to the new rules. And I think one thing at least I noticed last week is kind of that desire to try to place the ball between the 5-yard line and the goal line, which Purdue struggled with by kicking a couple out of bounds. Meadows did 2 last week, was it? But any other adjustments you see in terms of that one big rule change?
Yeah.
Of course, kicking off from the 35 instead of the 30.
Right.
I think what you have to do is coach your return men a little bit more to make good decisions. There are obviously going to come points in time where they have to decide whether or not they want to take the ball out from 2 yards deep in the end zone. If they feel like they have it, they have to go. If they don't feel like they have it, they have to learn to fight another day. Put that knee down on the ground.
I think
you just have them make good decisions.
Yeah.
And I think with JB Gibney, they will return it if it's only 2 yards deep. I think that the real decision is if it's 5 yards deep, if it's 7 yards deep, which not even sure how many kickers they play against can even do that.
Right.
But I think that's where the decision making lies, because they want to let Mostert and Akeem Hunt show what they can do. And I know they have some younger guys up front, and kind of the blue collar guys like they call them. But to me, I think, and we didn't get to see that last week because there weren't any kicks in the end zone. They only got 2 opportunities, and they were both short.
Well, and the touchback rule back to the 25 is forcing the kicking team to want to pin them as deep as they can, and that makes for an interesting dynamic as well. Okay, we are going to take a 2-minute break and run at least 2 minutes worth of Follett's commercials in between. But of course, we want to thank our sponsors, Follett's Purdue Pride, and of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson and Hilton Garden Inn. We're going to shoo off Brian and Stacy. We'll bring Stacy back for segment 3, and we'll bring in Bart Burl and Jeff Julich as we'll talk more Purdue football and try to impart or to get some real wisdom out of those 2 guys, which may take us a full 20 minutes to do that. You never know. So we'll look forward to that, and we'll see you in a couple minutes on Gold and Black Live. Bye.
Going to the Purdue game? Stay at Hilton Garden Inn, West Lafayette at the Wabash Landing. Your family will love the well-appointed guest rooms, the pool, whirlpool, fitness center, the breakfast buffet, and the amazing Hilton Garden Inn staff. Located just 4 blocks from Purdue University, Hilton Garden Inn has long been the choice for Purdue fans. Call today for a reservation and make Hilton Garden Inn your #1 choice.
Check out the Purdue collection now at Follett's. Boiler up with Nike Fantastic T-shirts, League and Champion fashion colors. Simply fabulous, simply Follett's. Purdue pride everywhere on game day. Nike sideline, worn by the team, by the players, and by you. And make every day game day with tailgate toss. Follett's Purdue pride, a Purdue tradition, 17 game day locations.
Wouldn't it be great if we could all rest this easy? Well, when it comes to meeting your insurance needs, you can. State Farm agent Trent Johnson is there to get you the coverage you need and the discounts you deserve. Home, car, life, even financial services. It's just part of being there. Call or visit Trent today. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
The Friday Night Frenzy. It's about tradition. It's about pride. It's about rivalries. It's about commitment. It's about teamwork. It's about the action of the game. On Friday nights, when area high school teams hit the field for the game, our team hits the field to get you the scores, the highlights, and all of the action. Friday Night Frenzy, a high school tradition.
Segment 2, Gold and Black Live, and our fans move from the seats to the stands, so to speak. We bring in Bart Burrell and Jeff Julich, and welcome to the show, gentlemen. And we have a lot to talk about. Anytime it's Notre Dame week, it's a special week for Purdue football, and this year is no different. Huge game for the Boilermakers tomorrow afternoon, starting 3:30. At Notre Dame Stadium. We want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank Jeff Julich, but he's a lot more than a sponsor here. He also knows his way around college football, and is always gives some great insight into what's going on. But obviously, with our friends at Follett's Purdue Pride, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, and Hilton Garden Inn. Thank you for being on board for another year. And Bart, you've been in the stadium with your helmet on and your pads on twice, two different experiences, a 10-6 loss in 78. I don't want to use the term loss twice, but the 78 game was a very competitive game, went down to the very end. The 80 game, big national television game, didn't go as well. Notre Dame wins 31-10. But talk about what it really is like to, as a youngster, you were under 20 years old, probably the first time you walked into Notre Dame Stadium, but what that's like and what some of these guys may be feeling for their first experience up at Notre Dame.
You know, Alan, for me, it was my sophomore year, so we had a year on the road as a freshman, and I found Ohio State Stadium to be the most intimidating. And then as a sophomore, maybe I was a year older, it wasn't as intimidating. Now, mind you, the stadium was smaller back then, too.
59,000 then.
59,000 all the way around, so it just didn't seem as big to me. And so the intimidation factor isn't the noise. It did seem smaller. I mean, the fans are right on top of you. There's very little room around this field. So, 100 yards seemed more like 80 yards or something. It just felt smaller. But there's all the tradition. There's the touchdown, Jesus. There's all that other stuff that you see. So,
do you think about that as a player? Do you know that? I mean, or do you think guys are oblivious to that?
I think you think about it on Friday when you walk in there, and do your little walkthroughs. But on Saturday, you're really thinking about the guy across from you. So it's not as big a deal then. And then it just becomes a factor of how do you handle the crowd noise. And again, there were louder places than Notre Dame Stadium back then. I don't know what it's like today. I've not been in the stadium since they've added the additional, 20 rows or so.
Yeah. And Jeff obviously grew up in a big-time environment, played in the Ohio State marching band, so he has been in the biggest of college environments. But you've been at South Bend too for Purdue football games. What about your experience up there? How do you view that as a venue?
Well, it certainly has changed over the years. When they did add the addition, I think they took away from some of the environment. You don't see touchdown Jesus as you're in the stadium like you used to. And, they've had an issue there. I mean, when you look at it, they're 17-16 at home since 2007.
Yeah.
So they're not dominating. They've lost to Tulsa, they've lost to Navy, they've lost to several opponents up there. And so, they're working on the environment up there, trying to become an intimidating place like Ohio State, like Badger Stadium, those kind of places where there's going to be a very loud crowd. And right now, that's something they don't really have in Notre Dame.
And Bart, you talk about some of the places, and you talk about Ohio State being intimidated. I know in your freshman year they beat you bad there, and it was a pretty amazing environment. But they also, you go to other places around the league. You had some fun games at Wisconsin. What were your favorite places to play in the league, as you recall, in terms of the more fun venues, in terms of just the way the fans were in that environment?
Well, that's rather easy. Ross-Ade Stadium would be the most fun.
Outside of Ross-Ade Stadium.
You know, I think you probably hit it with Wisconsin. That was a lot of fun to play there. Their fans really got into it. They had a lot of fun. I know my parents had a lot of fun going to the game. So it was just a really good environment. And quite frankly, at that point in time, it wasn't always totally sold out either. But it was a great place to play. Iowa was more of a high school stadium type of feel, but it was always very full and loud as well.
And Bart, he usually doesn't need an introduction. Obviously played at Purdue from 1977 to 80, part of the famed Carmel connection for the Boilermakers, and was a standout 3-year starter receiver for Purdue. And Jeff, you know, you look around some of the great venues in the league, and obviously you grew up close to one in Columbus, but talk about some of your favorite places that you enjoy to watch.
Well, I tell you what, one of my favorite places is a place we've yet to visit, and that's Nebraska Stadium. I mean, I had the opportunity to live out in Nebraska for 3 or 4 years and attend several football games out there, and you talk about a knowledgeable fan base, and that crowd out there is just amazing. And I'm really excited for when the Boilers get a chance to go out there and play Nebraska. But, you know, when you talk about, you got Michigan, just the sheer size of the stadium is just amazing. And then, you know, after that, you know, obviously Ohio State has a great stadium as well. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, how this works out when Purdue gets to go to Nebraska and some of these road games that they've got coming up.
Now, Alan, you asked me the question of what was the most fun to play. You didn't say intimidating.
Yeah.
Ohio State, as I said before, was the most intimidating, and Michigan was just a bigger Notre Dame, louder, just the dull
Very
noise.
similar type stadium, actually.
Just the dull noise, you know, not the fans getting into the game, just the noise of 100,000 people when you're down in the field creates some difficulties just with signals, etc.
And I just laugh at Jeff because as the business that Jeff's in, of course he's looking forward to Nebraska coming to West Lafayette, only because of the 20,000 fans that the Big Red will probably bring for their first trip, and that is next year. Or no, Purdue goes out there next year.
No, next year that Nebraska's here.
Here in 2013.
Yeah,
so that will be interesting to see how that transpires. All right, let's look at tomorrow's game and the matchup. Bart, you had a chance to see Purdue play last week, and certainly an impressive in terms of a 48-6 win. What are the things if you were looking at what you have to do to win at Notre Dame? Obviously, the 5 turnovers we've talked about, but anything else that comes to the table in terms of what the Boilermakers need to do to get out of South Bend alive?
Well, you really just need to go and execute. You have to play well, and you have to take the crowd out of the game. I mean, you can't. You know, I know they've been emphasizing get behind early. It's one thing to be behind. It's another thing to lose all the momentum. But throughout the course of any 60-minute game, there's going to be momentum swings. You hope that Purdue is more mature, older. They have older players, that they'll be able to handle that. They'll be able to get through those rough spots and come back. That's what they're going to have to do, because there will be rough spots. There always are.
Yeah, always are. Jeff, you have a good feeling about tomorrow's game, you've said, but from a Purdue perspective, but give us your analysis of tomorrow.
Well, I just think there's so many unknowns about tomorrow's game. You know, we don't know how good Navy was, and we also don't know how good Eastern Kentucky was.
Yeah.
Both teams look very impressive. I do think this is probably the best defensive team Purdue has put on the field since 2003. I mean, they looked the part on the defensive line, both from a first team and second team perspective. I'm anxious to see if we've got some new twists. You know, are we going to throw in a little bit of 3-4 maybe tomorrow that we've been putting in for spring football and those kind of things. And then the question becomes, you know, how focused will this Notre Dame team be? I mean, they've got a stretch of games coming up here with Michigan State and Michigan and Stanford and Miami and Florida, and then you also look at a trip to Oklahoma and USC. So how focused are they going to be about with the Purdue team? So I think there's a lot of factors that really plays into Purdue hands tomorrow. And, you know, I also think we have probably the most team speed I've seen. And I think that's going to be really important to get some speed up there tomorrow. You know, spread them out a little bit, get some of the guys on the perimeters and see what we can do. And I have a great feeling about the game tomorrow.
You know, Bart, the interesting thing about Notre Dame last year in the game in West Lafayette, the thing that was tough, not only the way the game started, Purdue got down 21-0, but just the physicality, the way the Notre Dame kind of came in, just forced its will on Purdue. How do you do that as a player, knowing that happened to you the year before, and it happened to Purdue in a couple other games last year, maybe against Wisconsin and Michigan as well? How do you turn that table? I mean, there's a lot of self-talk going on. This is a very positive outfit in the Boilermakers, but again, when you line up next to that person, what do you have to continually tell yourself in terms of what it's going to take to compete at this level?
You know, again, as a player, you think you can win. At least you better think you can win.
Yeah.
And so I don't think they're thinking about last year and how they were physically dominated. I think they were thinking about last year. They didn't play well. They lost the game. Going back to our freshman year at Ohio State, we lost, what was the score?
46 to nothing.
And then the next year we came back and beat Ohio State 27-16.
Want to know?
When we're talking about big turnarounds from one year to the next, that was one. We did not go into that game thinking we have no chance. You know, we went into it, the coaching staff had prepared us, and we expected to win.
Yeah.
And you have to, if you have to think that going into a football game. But Notre Dame showed their will against Navy and, you know, just pounded it down their throat. If they do that against Purdue, we're in trouble. I mean, I would think that will not happen with our defensive line.
Well, and that's the ultimate test. I mean, I think it's still, you know, as talk about in football, you got to be able to stop the run at some point. And Purdue certainly, you know, I thought Danny Hope was very interested interesting on Media Day, talking about how he expects this defense to be in the upper half statistically in the Big Ten. The way you do that is by stopping the run. Purdue's really struggled doing that, though.
Big players have to make big-time plays, though. I mean, a couple of years ago when we had a good chance up there, Ryan Kerrigan looked like a first-round draft choice in that football game.
Yeah.
Kawana Short has to do the same thing. He can't go in there and be a non-factor.
What impressed you? You talked about the defense just in terms of last week, in terms of individuals. Obviously, Short had a Kawan Short, I should say. Well, Stacy's here, and figured that one out for the rest of us. But the whole, you know, he was obviously very impressed. Gaston with the back injury last year certainly looked fresh and was going after and getting folks. What other guys stepped up for you, in your opinion?
Well, I just think, you know, when you look at the secondary, I thought the secondary is very strong. And with Fletcher, when he's won that starting job as a walk-on, he looked very impressive. And I was impressed with the linebackers. I mean, you know, that's the real question mark when you look at with losing Beckford. And, you know, when Robinson got in, he looked the part. I mean, you know, he didn't look like a skinny quarterback who we saw on the field 2 years ago. This guy looked like a real Big Ten linebacker. And so, you know, that'll be the interesting thing tomorrow is how well I think the middle linebacker holds up with Gilliam, because, you know, they're going to run the ball at us up the middle. And, you know, the linebackers are going to have to take on those blocks and make the plays. And so I think tomorrow the key is how well the linebackers play.
In Bart, you know, when you're playing days, and of course in Drew Brees' playing days, you had offensive lines that you could count on. You had continuity, you had stability in there. By the time you were a senior. Most of those guys had played 3 and 4 years together for the most part, and certainly Drew's, you know, the well-established Matt Light and Brandon Gorin on down the line, so to speak. How important is that? You know, you see 3 new faces last week. For the most part, I don't know how you can be real critical of what happened, because the only sack was really on a trip, though that somebody did come free in that situation to nab Robert Marr. But this is still has to be a work in progress, and it has to be something that Notre Dame, I would think, will try to exploit.
It does, but it's also, don't underestimate what the quarterback can do for the offensive line. Yeah. What play calling can do for the offensive line. You can help those guys out a lot. And if the quarterback knows where to go with the ball, knows where to go with it quickly, that helps. And he also has to know where to get rid of it when he has to get rid of it, who's hot, where they're going. And those guys, you know, you rush, and if you don't get a sack, it gets tiring after a while. You get a few sacks, and boy, it's easy to come after them. So it's really, don't underestimate some of those other factors that can help the line.
And I think that's probably the reason that you'll probably see Caleb under center tomorrow. Yeah. Because he's been outstanding at getting Purdue in the right place. You know, and that is so important in the NFL game. You know, that's why Peyton Manning's a master of what he does. You know, quarterbacks like to throw the football, but how many times do they check to the right running play and the blocking schemes and everything? And I think that's where Caleb has a real grasp for this offense that he may have a little better grasp than Marv does. And I think that's what you want to be able to get in the right play up in Notre Dame.
It's no coincidence you named offensive lines with Mark Herman and Drew Brees as a quarterback.
Yeah,
I mean, we could talk all day we want about Pete Quinn, but we're going to do more.
I thought we'd get through this whole show without one Pete Quinn mention, because we know that every radio broadcast does not get done without a Bart Burrow or Mark Herman mention. That's for sure from Pete. You know, I think that is an interesting point, and you have to look at Purdue's ability to you know, just to block and tackle, do the basic things there. If you do those things well, you don't shoot yourself in the foot, so to speak, or other places, you have a chance. One would think, because Notre Dame, you know, came off last year. They certainly disappointing. And I think Pete Sampson from Irish Illustrated brought up a good point this week, talking about it was how Notre Dame, it was the schedule they played. Now, if Notre Dame has the same record as it did last year, might actually have had a really good year based on this schedule. But there's still some real question about where the Irish are going, and still some question about Brian Kelly and in terms of, there's always that question up at Notre Dame. Does that ever play? Do both of you guys think play to an advantage for maybe a reason why the Irish have struggled a little bit at home, or is it just a talent issue?
Well, I just think it's expectation levels and a talent level. I mean, I don't think you'll ever see Notre Dame get to the point where they're going to be 12-0 like the fans want them to be. And that's simply because the recruits today have so many options. Warm weather schools, the SEC is getting all the talent, USC is getting the talent. A team like Ohio State can bring in some talent. But, it used to be you had to go to Notre Dame to get on television. And now they're on television. Every team's on every day, every game, the Big Ten Network and all the different conference networks that are there. And it's just a situation where I don't see Notre Dame ever getting the point back to where they're going to be 12-0. I think more realistically, a 9-3 season is going to have to be the expectations of Notre Dame fan.
Do you look at it as the talent around the country? I mean, obviously the SEC has still been so dominant, but is it changed that much between the kind of kids that Notre Dame got back in your day of playing versus now, or is it just the whole talent pool is just that much more highlighted in those differences?
That's a tough question, Alan. I know that Purdue doesn't out-recruit Notre Dame a heck of a lot, and I know Notre Dame gets their fair share of very good athletes, and I think as Boilermaker fans, we would take their talent every year and try to go 12-0 with it. And so I'm not gonna say I'm gonna be a little tougher on them than Jeff. I'm gonna say, no, they can do it. I don't know if they'll do it, but there's nothing holding them back.
All right. I swore I wouldn't ask you guys predictions, but what's your main reason why you have the good feeling tomorrow? What's the main thing? This team kind of shapes up like the 2014. I see explosive return game like we had with Jerome Brooks, and we had the touchdown. We had the veteran quarterback with Kyle Orton, and you've got the veteran quarterbacks that we have there. We have a strong defense. And I just got a really good feeling that the Boilers have been taken to the woodshed the last couple of times, and there's a lot of frustrations on our football team. And I think we want this game a lot more than Notre Dame does. Okay, and the one thing. Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I just think that I think it's going to be a game where the defense holds its own, the offense makes the plays. One thing I'm really concerned about is our kicking game, simply because we didn't have a chance to try a field goal. And you're going to need some field goals up there. But I just think everything will come together for the Boilers on this one. And I think this may be the signature win that Danny Hope needs.
Okay, and the one thing that you'll be watching for in terms of what Purdue, if you see Purdue doing this early in the game, it will be a 60-minute game. What would that be?
I think holding their position up front. I mean, if they're able to come right out of the gate and run it down our throat, we're in trouble. It's going to be a long day. But if our defensive line can put up a good fight and the linebackers come through, I think you're going to see a good football game. I think Notre Dame, that's how they won this past week. I mean, they were never threatened. They could do what they wanted to do. And if their running game stumbles a little bit, it's going to be a good ball game.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Well, before we leave, I had to bring the Karpik Gold Leeds Red Devils, and it's not Alan, by the way.
No, it's not.
It's his talented daughter.
Well, thank you. We'll add that to the pile.
She had a great
I like the picture
game-winning goal.
So, yeah, so there's at least one gamer in the family. That's a good thing. And as I've told her many times, this may be your last chance to be on the headlines, but a very cool thing to have happen.
But she was on the head. She was in the headlines. Thing.
All right, thanks, Bart, for bringing that along. Thank you guys so much for being on the show. We'll take a 2-minute hiatus and bring back Stacy and bring in Kyle. And we'll finish up this show with a bang. We've got a huge fan following now here at the store. We're live from Follett's Purdue Pride, and we'll look forward to seeing you in a couple minutes on Gold and Black Live.
Going to the Purdue game? Stay at Hilton Garden Inn, West Lafayette at the Wabash Landing. Your family will love the well-appointed guest rooms, the pool, whirlpool, fitness center, the breakfast buffet, and the amazing Hilton Garden Inn staff. Located just 4 blocks from Purdue University, Hilton Garden Inn has long been the choice for Purdue fans. Call today for a reservation and make Hilton Garden Inn your #1 choice.
Check out the Purdue collection now at Follett's. Boiler up with Nike Fantastic T-shirts, League and Champion fashion colors. Simply fabulous, simply Follett's. Purdue pride everywhere on game day. Nike sideline, worn by the team, by the players, and by you. And make every day game day with tailgate toss. Follett's, Purdue pride, a Purdue tradition, 17 game day locations.
Good driver? We've got a discount for that and a lot more. See State Farm agent Trent Johnson to make sure you get all the discounts you deserve on your car insurance. Saving you money? It's just part of being there. Call or visit Trent today. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
The Friday Night Frenzy. It's about tradition. It's about pride. It's about rivalries. It's about commitment. It's about teamwork. It's about the action of the game. On Friday nights, when area high school teams hit the field for the game, our team hits the field to get you the scores, the highlights, and all of the action. Friday Night Frenzy, a high school tradition.
Welcome back, segment 3, Gold and Black Live. We've prettied it up here, as they said, at least on our on the chat. Kyle Charters and Stacy back with us for another segment. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thanks for finally having me.
I know. Well, I think what you guys should do is just kick me off and let somebody else host the show. Kyle would do a lot better job. But anyway, you got me for another segment, and we're looking forward to. We'll talk. We still have some questions we haven't answered, certainly, and a fair number of questions this week, which we appreciate very much. You are watching Gold and Black Live. It's kind of a destination deal. If you don't know that you're watching Gold and Black Live, you have issues. So, and we want to thank our sponsors, certainly Follett's, Purdue Pride, Purdue's Game Day Outfitters, and Purdue Tradition since 1945, and of course Hilton Garden Inn. We were down at Christy Kuntz's abode last week during our show from there. When tomorrow is a big day, stay at HGI tonight, and of course State Farm agent Trent Johnson, State Farm agent, or is it TrentIsMyAgent.com? I always screw that up. 765-497-9595. And you know, we're trying to look at tomorrow's game. And Kyle, we haven't. I know that we're probably getting grief on our own boards about the four of us not picking Purdue to win. At least I assume that
those guys aren't like that. They wouldn't give us grief.
Yeah, I know.
Not at all. They'll support everything we say.
I saw a post asking us to man up.
I know.
So, Stacy, you have to man up.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
But Kyle,
I don't know our discussion in the office this week.
Kyle, certainly looking at the game tomorrow and looking at what keys you see, and yet this is a game that on paper Purdue has a chance, certainly, even though they're 2 touchdown underdogs. But what's it going to take for Purdue to take this game deep into the fourth quarter?
Well, I think Stacy stole my thoughts earlier, but I think it comes down to Purdue's offensive line. I know there was a lot of talk after the game against Eastern that Purdue's offensive line played pretty well because they gave up no sacks. Well, they actually did give up a sack, and I thought they were only okay. Against an inferior opponent like the Colonels, I think Purdue looks pretty good across the offensive line, but I'm a little concerned about left tackle in particular. I thought they missed some blocks up front, especially on some running plays, which, if Purdue wants to be able to maybe control the clock a little bit tomorrow, they need to be able to run the football against what is a pretty good front seven for Notre Dame. So to me, it all comes down to whether Purdue can maybe not control the line of scrimmage, but at least not get beat there from the offensive point of view, not get beat there and be able to control the clock a little bit.
And how this show works, if you're joining us late, obviously you can send us questions. You can chat amongst yourselves, and we'll pick out, even if they're inadvertent questions, we'll throw them on here, so you have to be careful. And you can also obviously direct message us those as well. I don't know why we're not doing the Twitter thing here. I suppose we could do that as well. But we do have a question from Andrew, one of our weekly watchers, certainly talking about Carlos Carvajal and asking about whether Carlos is going to play this year. Stacy, how badly hurt is he? And you know, you did a nice feature on the tight ends this week, but didn't necessarily involve Carlos.
That's true.
But
Check out that feature unless you're Carlos.
yeah, but by the same token, you obviously, you guys both have been covering the team on pretty much a daily basis.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, he's out with a groin injury. He didn't participate very much in training camp. So for a new guy coming in, even though he was here in the spring, it hurts. It hurts you, and they don't need him. I think that's the biggest thing. That's what's going to be the most interesting thing is they don't need him right now with the group that they have at tight end. So to let him have this year to really learn the offense and understand what's happening. I mean, physically, like, you know, he looks the part, but is he grasping what they need him to do? Does he understand his role? Can he block? I mean, those kind of things. So I don't think it'll hurt them this year if he doesn't play, because I don't think they need him right now. So. But yeah, he's hurt right now.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's not even really an option at this point.
I think he only practiced maybe 2 days of the first 3 weeks,
Yeah.
and I don't think he was practicing much after that. Danny Hope has said he would play if he was healthy, but you know, he's missed so much now. He's missed game 1. I wouldn't anticipate him from an injury standpoint being ready for a while. So I would say he's probably headed toward a red shirt, but you know, it's a long season. The same could be said for BJ Knopf. I mean, he missed a ton of training camp with the back injury, and I think BJ was probably less likely maybe to play than Carlos just anyway coming in, just because I think Knopf from a physicality point of view isn't quite there yet. But you know, he probably won't go this year either because of missing so much time.
Well, and I don't think it's a bad thing for either one of those guys either. And to look at you know, we talked about Danny Hope talking about the class of 2012 coming in, and what 5 got on the field last week, which actually there were 8 newcomers, but five true freshmen, which was actually less than I thought. But I think maybe that's maybe a good sign in some ways, because you played a lot of players, but you're playing now, you know, your redshirt freshmen, and on down the line getting some experience there. And yet Danny Hope has shown throughout his time in West Lafayette that he's going to throw guys on the field if they can play. I mean, he's taking red shirts. I can remember taking a red shirt off of Tariq McBurse in the second half of the season in 2009.
Jelani Phillips last year.
Yeah, and Jelani Phillips late in the season. So you have that option, certainly from that standpoint, that where you would look at that, and I think Danny, it's always going to be a work in progress in terms of how he's going to approach that. But I think Carvajal is an intriguing guy just because of his size and his ability to, even in the spring, showed some ability to catch the football and make plays, and he's a confident guy. So we know that, and that part will be interesting to see. But it'll be interesting also to see what of the young guys really get on the field tomorrow. Will that number go from 5 to 0? I think that will give you a little bit of an indication of what, and I know a couple of guys will probably play on special teams, but my point is it'll be interesting to see if you know, the Danny Anthrops or Anthony Browns or any of those guys get into the lineup tomorrow.
I think Brown will probably play. I think Watson will probably play. You know, I think Brown, maybe depending on the health of Normando Harris and Josh Johnson a little bit, whether, you know, I think Josh is certainly going to play. Now, whether he plays every single defensive snap out there, that might be questionable because he's been dealing with that ankle injury.
Yeah.
I would be surprised, though. He's a tough guy. I mean, he played last year with, like, his ankle all messed up and didn't get surgery till the offseason. So I would be surprised if he doesn't play.
And if you were going to look at a 6th guy, you know, maybe a Cameron Posey, although, you know, I think that might depend on the development of Delavo McCarthy and how well he plays, whether Posey gets in there as the number 6 freshman, I suppose, who would give it a go this year.
We had a question about, and I don't know, who did the O.J. Ross interview for the Kyle? He said,
don't you watch it? Don't you?
I just can't remember.
Shouldn't you know that?
I should know that. At the very end, he seemed to have the cat ate the canary comment. I'm anxious to see what Nord has up his sleeve schematically. Kyle, do you want to take a wild guess at what that is?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just asked him sort of toward the end of the interview whether, you know, you always run into trouble, especially these days, when you try and ask anything that might be scheme related or any kind of game plan related, whether it be of the coaches or these days even the players. But tried to ask OJ whether they thought they'd, you know, try and test some of those young corners with some deeper routes a little bit, and he sort of just, you know, you saw it on the video, tried to half answer without really saying anything.
Right. The
but,
same, like I said earlier, the same
Yeah.
thing that Raheem Mostert did. It's kind of like, we have a plan, but we're not going to tell you what the plan is,
Yeah.
but we're going to
So, I
probably
mean,
try
it,
something.
it does sound like they're going to try. And, you know, I know we got a question earlier about whether Gary Knorr is aggressive by nature. And I think that he is aggressive if he feels like Purdue can execute the plays.
Yeah.
I think that has been the problem more than anything, is just, you know, they've seen in the few times that they have taken, you know, a shot deep, that they can't execute it over the last couple of years. And they've probably seen that, you know, more than we have in practices as well. And, you know, maybe things will be different this year. Against Eastern Kentucky, there was really no reason to go deep. They were playing, you know, a 3-deep coverage too, and you know, you could just dink and dunk. Now, maybe Notre Dame will do some things differently, and you can try and take advantage. And you know, from talking to Ross and Mostert, it sounds like maybe they do have something planned to get the ball down the field.
Yeah, you know, and Gary Nord is, to me, is a guy that's kind of, you know, a realist, and yet he is a contrarian type offensive coordinator. I think they do try to do things, but he's really now, this may be the first year where he's got his full deck to play with, and we'll see what that is. From my simplistic view, I love the way that the Purdue approached the bowl game in terms of throwing the ball around and doing some crazy stuff. You can do that in certain situations. Gary Noter has shown a penchant for doing it, but he's also talked, even going back to 2009, about, you know, we're going to get the tight end involved. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Well, now he can do that, I think, clearly with his tight ends and do that.
You remember back to 2009 too, with Joey Elliott, and you know, throwing that ball on 3rd down or whatever it was inside your own 20-yard line that got picked off at Oregon, and you know, after,
or the play against Northwestern before the half, the first game too,
and
so,
you know,
year.
making those plays, and afterwards he says, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And you know, I think maybe that's what Purdue would have done the next 2 seasons had they not, you know, been so decimated at quarterback in 10, and then, you know, had the inexperience with Turbush, especially in the first half of last year. So, you know, I think just saying Gary Nord is conservative is maybe a little bit short-sighted, or just considering the recent past.
Yeah, I think he's the opposite. I think the thing I like about him is he takes a relatively mature approach. And the other thing is, we talk to anybody that talks about play calling, which I always love that. When you get to talking about the play calling, is how many what percentage of these plays are changed to the line of scrimmage anyway. So you have to be able to put yourself in the right position, have the right guys on the field, and then you have to have a quarterback that can make good decisions. And if you're a Purdue fan, you hope that starts with Caleb Turbush and follows Robert Marve around tomorrow, because that's going to be important against what you would think with Notre Dame, a defense that's going to take some chances on Purdue, try to mess Purdue up, disguise some things, maybe fool an offensive line that may not be ready to deal with some looks. Would that stand to reason?
I think what'll be interesting to see is what style of offense in terms of tempo Purdue comes out in, because Robert Marve is so good in that. I don't know if they like to necessarily call it a hurry up. It's kind of like, well, we can set the tempo from it. It can't, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like they don't say hurry up necessarily, but that's essentially what it can be. You know, you get everybody out there. You want to wear the defense out. You want to not let them substitute. So maybe if you snap it quicker, Notre Dame has less of a chance to maybe disguise things, or so that may help. But can Turbush run that as effectively? Obviously, he did it at points last year.
Right.
But so what tempo does Purdue decide to use?
And
to
that's
try
the
to
thing.
counter?
That's the thing that I've always liked about Marv, is that he seems to play. Everything he does seems to be at a little bit different tempo than Turbush. Right. And maybe that's one of the big improvements that Caleb has made during the offseason, is just, understanding maybe the tempo of the game a little bit more. And, if we see that early on tomorrow, I think that bodes well for Purdue. But I've always liked, I know he turns the ball over, but I've just liked the way, the urgency, yeah, that's a good word, in which he plays a little bit. And, perhaps, Caleb has matured from that point of view.
To me, that is maybe the thing, and no one asked me that question, so I'll ask myself. What is the thing that I see will happen, and it's going to be my telltale, and I think it is tempo for me, and that is, will Purdue be the aggressor on offense, or not aggressor, but be able to be willing to run that hurry up and be willing to do some things so that they make the rules, at least on the offensive side of the ball. I think that will tell you a little bit. First, it'll tell you, I would expect to see that out of Caleb Turbush tomorrow, just because of all of what we said, that he should be able to walk in and do what they want to do. And I think that's going to tell you a lot about how this football game will go early, is can Purdue get Notre Dame off balance. You know, Notre Dame's very aggressive on its front seven, and can you find a way to get some seams, for lack of a better term, to be able to move the football. That will be, since I asked myself, that will be the thing I will be watching for. Now we're down to our last minute. I'm not going to make you give your predictions again, but tell me, if Purdue wins, Kyle, what will they do to make that happen?
Well,
Besides scoring more
What was your
points.
prediction? What was your
I had
prediction?
22-15 Notre Dame. I think it ends up being lower scoring.
22?
Yeah, 22.
Yeah.
So you can get to 22.
I know you can.
2-point conversion.
There you
It's not like 4.
go. Sorry.
You could have a
Continue.
touchdown and 5 field goals.
There you go. That's what I was thinking, too.
Sorry.
I've completely lost my
6 field goals and 2 safeties. All right, go ahead.
What do they have to
No,
do?
what I have to do, I think Al said it a little bit. Control the tempo. I think you have to get off to a good start. I think you need to get off to a good start, but be aggressive still. I think everybody's a little bit concerned that Turbush means conservative and Turbush means hand the ball off and 3 times in a row and punt. Maybe it does, but I think if you're Purdue, you need to continue to try and be aggressive, not turn the ball over. Try and control the tempo, and defensively, I think you can try and make this Notre Dame team, one-dimensional if you can slow down their running game and making the young quarterback have to make some plays.
And that was going to be kind of my point: is this defense, Purdue's defense, what are they going to look like? I mean, we didn't see what this. I'm thinking what they envisioned this defense to be. I don't think we saw that at all against Eastern Kentucky. So. And Golson, yeah, okay, he had a good, he's a rookie still. I mean, I don't care what you did against that team, at Navy. He was thrown dink and dunk too.
Yeah.
So make him make decisions, I think. I mean, if they're, like Kyle said, if they're going to run the ball, you obviously have to shut down the run, but make that young quarterback make decisions, try to confuse him, get some pressure, and see how he responds. I mean, maybe this is about, Purdue's defense controlling the game instead of Purdue's offense.
I don't think you can completely shut down that running game, but if you allow them 150 to 170 yards, I think that's okay, considering what I think Notre Dame's going to try and do, and that's make things easy on the quarterback. But if you can control them and get them into 3rd and 5 situations fairly regularly, I think they might have an opportunity either to get a turnover or to to stymie that offense.
All right, that is the definitive word on tomorrow's football game. Purdue Notre Dame, 3:30 p.m. At Notre Dame Stadium. The Boilermakers, 2-touchdown underdog, but it will be a very important day for the Boilermakers in South Bend. All right, next week, our special guest, Morgan Burke, Purdue's athletics director, athletic director, we would struggle with that plural. He will be joining us. We should be back in the studios. Morgan's set to join us at the 2:20 segment next week. We'll have a lot to talk about, I'm sure, regarding Purdue Notre Dame, and then looking ahead to Purdue's game with Eastern Michigan. We want to thank you for joining us. Thank you back to Lydia back at the TV18 studios, and Gordon Jackson for carting that computer and that little camera here and lugging all that back and forth and getting set up. Special thanks to Jeff Julik and Ty Sutton and the folks at Follett for all of their work to get this ready and to have this magnificent set put up for us. We appreciate that, and we will look forward to seeing you next week, same time, 2 o'clock Eastern, for Golden Black Live.